Hey guys, today I have Elisa. So Elisa joined my program on August 4th, 2022. So we're recording this on August 23rd. So it's just over a year ago. And her story is going to be interesting because I got an email from her about 2 weeks back or 3 weeks back, I think. And she said basically, hey, here's the outcome win I'm getting a year in. But I swear, when I first joined your program, Jeff, I thought it was some timeshare scam thing. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit. And her case was also pretty hopeless in the sense of when she joined the program, her partner had already wanted to break up, and basically, even when her partner saw her changes, he was still saying, I don't love you anymore. I don't feel the same way about you anymore. And so he was limiting contact a lot. Um, so we'll get to that in a bit. But I think this is a case where a lot of people can relate to the direness of it, the hopelessness of it, etc. So let's start by talking about how things were in the beginning. Let's go all the way back to the few days before you even started the program. And that breakup conversation that you guys had.
So I was just in an absolute spin when I found your program. I was desperate. I was in a total panic. I would have done anything to change the situation. Leading up to the breakup, I was in like a really dark place. I think in hindsight, I was really depressed, and my partner was also really depressed. And I was having a lot of trouble connecting with him and helping him with his depression. And I was depressed and I was dragging him down. Um, Additionally, I had a lot of trouble with what we call in the program the negative flywheel. And it was one of these negative flywheel days that ultimately just like led to the end, absolute end of the relationship. I was just in a dark place. I couldn't get out of it. My partner could sense that. We had a blow up, and he was just like, I'm done. I'm done with you. I'm done with the relationship. Like it's over. And I was so desperate, so sad. He was also sad. Like he was also facing his own loss, and he was also devastated. And I mean, he wanted to marry me, and I just could not make this relationship work. There was just so many problems on my part, just so many like maladaptive ways of dealing with things, with dealing with life, dealing with relationships, could not communicate, could not connect, that we could just not make this relationship I couldn't make it last. Just couldn't tackle those things, those problems, those communication issues, and then the depression, his depression, my now in hindsight obvious depression.
Mm.
I just had no coping skills at all.
So when he said to you, I'm done, what were your thoughts at that point in time? I mean, now that we're looking at it
No,
a year back, you're
right,
thinking, oh, a lot of the flaws, now that I look back at it, is really me. I was also
right.
not contributing to positively to that feedback loop. But I'm sure in the beginning, that's not what you thought. You thought probably like, oh my God, he's leaving me and he's betraying me, abandoning me. Like, what was going through your
Oh
mind at
yeah.
that point in time?
Yeah, he's abandoning me. I always knew he would leave. I always knew he would leave, right? Like even throughout our whole relationship, I sort of had this like you're gonna just gonna leave. You'll find somebody else. I just had a lot of like weird victim mindset, like weird neediness, and also was always convinced that he would always leave, always convinced that he was never really that dedicated. And then, of course, it came true, right? Because of my own behavior,
Mm.
like this self-fulfilling prophecy, the victim mindset. And so, yeah, it was heavy, heavy into the victim mindset. I mean, to some extent, like I knew that there were things I needed to change about how I was. There were things that I always knew that were really maladaptive, um, that I knew would sabotage my relationships. But I could not change these things. Like knowing that you need to change and changing are really different. Like there's no tool in the toolbox to make these changes. So it's just a weird, horrible, desperate feeling where you know that the way you are is wrong, and you know that you're sabotaging everything, but you can't stop yourself. It's a
Yeah.
terrible feeling. It's
Yeah.
terrible.
In the
Yeah.
program, we call that like the surviving approach to controlling yourself internally. It's basically,
Right.
for a lack of a better word, it's like clenching your asshole to keep your shit in a way. But eventually,
Oh,
with enough
exactly.
pressure, yeah, go
You,
ahead.
you you can't keep it in, right? And it was just like, I just, yeah, like, you need to change. You can't, you're using willpower, like you said, like clenching it in, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Yeah.
And I think you felt what a lot of people watching this would feel, which is that one-sidedness of the relationship. Because, like, usually what happens is a lot of our own victim mindsets, a lot of our own lack of bulletproofness, tetheredness, it causes us to basically not be a leader in our own life.
Right.
So that we're barely keeping our own crap together, let alone helping other people to thrive too. So if we
Right.
see our partners going downhill and we are not in a non-victim mindset, we're not in a thriving state, we're not in an untethered state, we get pulled along with that, right?
Yes.
And when we get pulled
Yes.
along with that, we do things to push our partners further down, and then
Yes.
that pulls us further down. And so it feels one-sided in the sense of like, oh, you left me, you betrayed me, but you never really understood just how much you contributed to that problem. And we'll talk more about this as we continue in the interview as well. But the
Right.
funny thing is, like, when you ask people who think they're in one-sided relationships like you were in back then, what's funny is that both partners always feel like they're in one-sided relationships. But like
Right.
mathematically, that's impossible. Like, if you're actually in a one-sided relationship, then only one person should feel it, technically,
Right.
right? But both
Right.
people feeling it doesn't make
Exactly.
sense because you guys are all just feeding into each other's feedback loop, where his behavior is affecting yours, your behavior is then affecting his, and vice versa. And we'll talk more about this as we go
Exactly.
on.
Right.
So you bought the program a few days after the breakup, after watching my videos.
Right.
And you told your partner that you were doing the program. And I think I sense here a bit of manipulation, maybe, in a sense of you were trying, I think, to use the program, the fact that you were joining the program, as a way to tell your partner, hey, since I'm doing this program now, can we please not break up? Instead, can we maybe just separate for a bit? Maybe just take a break.
Separate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's separate. Yeah. Let's just take a break. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I think, he was really committed to the relationship. And I mean, he wanted to marry me at one point. And so I sent him your video on YouTube on, like, should we separate? I think I must have found it on a search. And he was like, okay, kind of open to the idea. We set like a tentative date of like 6 months, but he was also like very standoffish. Like, he came over to the house one more time to help me with something, and he slept downstairs. He
Mm.
wouldn't touch me. Like, he like really kept those boundaries in place. We were only allowed to talk like once a week. And I guess he actually watched a number of your videos. Um which I didn't realize, but he said you actually watched a lot of your videos after I sent it to him, which I think is really interesting, and actually shows that he was actually, even in the
Trying.
breakup,
He's
still
trying.
committed,
Mm.
trying, right? He was open to it. And I remember him talking to me. He's like, I watched some of those videos about dopamine and how couples will kind of wind each other up and get like a dopamine hit from the fighting, from like winding each other up. And he was sort of interested in that because he also knows some stuff about like dopamine, like neurobiology. And we talk about these things. So he was a little bit open to it. And yeah, I think it was sort of like, people will join AA, or they'll join these things, to fix this problem. And, just as their significant other has like walked out the door, right? Because
Mm.
we only get help when we're
Yeah.
situation is absolutely dire, is
Yeah.
is the problem. And try to use it to kind of pull the person back in, and the other person's like, "No."
Yeah. So I get the
Yeah.
question a
And
lot on, like, some
Yeah.
people who watch my videos and they say, should I share this with my partner? And
Right.
I would say there's not really a right or wrong answer to it. If you're sharing it because you are trying to avoid the work of growing yourself, of
Right.
leading the healing eventually, and you just want this video to be like, hey, partner, look, this is what you need to work on, then
Right.
don't
No.
share with your partner if that's what you want.
No.
Or if you
No.
want to use it as like an intention of like, here, watch this to see what I'm watching, so you can so I can convince you that I'm trying at least, then don't
Right.
share it. But if you're sharing it because you want to actually have a deeper conversations, like a deeper learning, a deeper insight, a deeper like revelation into how to lead the healing better, then share it. So it's all
Right.
depends on the intention. Like we always say in the videos, right? What you do cannot make you powerful, cannot make you genuine. It's the intention you come with. Oop.
Okay.
So sorry, guys.
Okay.
The connection got cut off, I guess. But yeah, Elisa, don't worry about the technical issue stuff. It cannot be worse than working with my parents on like fixing their technical issues. It's even worse. Oh my God. And they're like all over Indonesia too. So I have to
I know.
figure out via screen is bad. But where we left off was basically so I wanted to talk about this. So if
So
you
we're
are,
talking about sharing the
yeah, they're
program.
sharing the program, like
Yeah.
it depends on your intention for doing so, right?
Yes.
Again, at the end of the day, you have to be the one who's leading the change. There's no
Right.
shortcut around that.
No.
So I think though, even though he was like secretly trying and watching my videos, I don't think he actually communicated that to you. I think the thing he communicated to you was, uh, like you mentioned, he was very strict on how much you could communicate. He said
Mm-hmm.
like once a week or once a month kind of thing. And after 1 month of you in the program, he said, I see a lot of changes, but I made up my mind. I don't love you
Right.
anymore. I don't feel the same way anymore. I did not want to get back together. There's no chance of getting back
Right.
together.
Right.
What was the exact words that he said at that point in time?
He said that in the last month, it's only confirmed what I knew all along, that I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't want to get back together with you. And he admitted, he said, he's like, I didn't think you could change. He's like, but you are changing.
But
And
still, even with the changes, he's
even with the
still,
changes,
yeah.
he's like, you're lighter and happier than I thought you could ever be. And this was just 1 month into the program, but I don't care. He's like, I don't love you anymore. I realize now that I haven't been in love with you for at least a year now, and we're not gonna get back together.
Hmm.
He's like, I don't need to wait 6 months. We're not getting back together.
And so obviously in the program, we told you this was going to happen, right? Like the
Yes.
partner was going to say this. We call this the paradox of change. We'll talk about that deeper later.
Yes.
But what was your feeling when he said that? Like, because I bet you would feel,
Oh,
okay, here I am doing all this work, but all this
right.
work, despite all this work, it's still not cutting it. I mean, that must be pretty discouraging.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, well, I'm spending like hours on the program, and I was like, I was working a ton. I'm doing I deploy for my job, and I work 12-hour shifts at my job. And so I was like just getting ready after I talked to him to sit down and work on the program. And then, I had to decide, like I remember he just, did that, where you say they're going to take away all hope, tell you it's hopeless, tell you there's no chance, and that they don't care about your changes. And I just remember I sat down and I was like, so you still going to do the program? And I remember just deciding in that moment that I was just going to keep going.
good.
And I'm like, I just remember just sitting down at my computer and I had the modules open and I decided, like, I just felt so deflated and I just had to decide like what I was going to do. And I was just decided, I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to keep going with the program. Like, I'm just not going to stop. I'm just going to do it for me. And I did.
That's great. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what we want, which is the effort and surrender untethering parts we'll
Yes.
talk about in a bit. And you said that paid off because here we are a year later. You said after a few months of you sticking with the program, sticking with your internal shifts and growing,
Right.
you guys were now talking several hours, several times per week. How did that
Yes.
progress? How did that build? Like, yeah.
So, he was pretty receptive. He's very receptive to a lot of the, are we gonna talk about the frameworks? I feel like I'm lucky. He enjoys communicating with me. He likes talking to me,
Mm.
and while I was not a good communicator before, you know, once I learned to acknowledge his feelings, once I learned to acknowledge my shortcomings, he was actually remarkably receptive to that. I guess that was something that's sort of like unique to our relationship. And you kind of talk about that, like the partners are actually secretly rooting for us. They say that they're not. They say that they don't care about our changes, but they are watching the changes and they do become curious about the changes. And they are receptive because in the end, we start giving them something that they've always wanted all along, which is to acknowledge how they feel, to admit our shortcomings, and to do it from a place that's genuine and not like overly apologetic or overly like without that self-flagellation. So things really turned around. I gave him the month. I took 6 more weeks or something, 8. He said we could talk again in a month after he broke up with me. We're real for reals, he said. And I just kept working on the program, and I kept working on some of the frameworks that you provided. And then when I talked to him again, I was able to use these frameworks to acknowledge how I had not listened to him in the past.
Mm.
And he really appreciated it
Mm.
because I'd never been able to go there with him before. I'd
Yeah.
never been able to admit my shortcomings. I hated being wrong. I hated being
Yeah.
wrong.
And
And he just needed that acknowledgement.
it's funny you say that because like
Yeah.
a lot of times we talk about this perfect process and perfect product illusion and how a lot of men, a lot
Yeah.
of women who are trying to save their relationship, they think they have to be perfect. But
Right.
being perfect actually makes you more imperfect, actually makes you more unbearable.
Right.
Because if someone is because it makes you in denial of your actual problems, and if you're in denial of it, then forget it. I don't want to be part of that. That's very hopeless, I think, for your partner.
Yes.
Um, so tell me how it progressed from there. So it progressed to many conversations, many hours of conversations because of
Yeah. So
frameworks. Keep going.
yeah. So I think once I was able to acknowledge that I was how I had been, and I was able to be more receptive to his changes, but also untethered, right? Like
Mm.
he could sense that I wasn't really needy, that I wasn't really hunting anymore. And I think, our partners are very receptive to being manipulated. Like he is a very perceptive person.
Everyone is.
So
Yeah, everyone is a lot
everyone
more
is.
perceptive than you think. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And so, we just talked genuinely about, I was doing a lot of outside of the, getting outside of my box, that OBE, getting outside. And I started to, just enjoy more of the things that he enjoyed, talking more about philosophy, um, and without having to try too hard, this allowed me to just lead with the changes. Instead of using that paradox of logic, like, oh, I've changed, I've changed, I've changed, I've changed.
Mm.
I could just naturally demonstrate the changes in the conversations because the changes were real. The work is real.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time in the second part, the second set of modules, where you work on your bulletproof. I mean, I lived there. Like a lot of people rush through that part. They just want to get to the frameworks. They tell me what to say. And I would keep leading that part and get to the frameworks and then realize I hadn't changed enough to play out the frameworks and then go back. So I really lived there. for, I want to say, like 7 months.
Yeah. And I believe
And
you. And I believe you because, like, in so many of my videos and so many of the interviews and so much of the program, we keep telling people you cannot skip the internal shifts, because I can
no,
teach you the right things to say, the right things to do. But if you are doing the right things with the wrong how, with the wrong intention, with the wrong internal state, you're forcing yourself to do it, right? You're
right,
doing it in a manipulative way. People can smell that a mile away, and it will
mile
end up
away.
backfiring harder than you think. And when it
Right,
backfires and you destroy trust again because you skip the internal shifts, it's going to be much harder to build it back up later. So don't make the
exactly.
mistake ever, right? Never make the
No.
mistake of thinking that you can fake the internal shifts, you can rush through it, because to execute the frameworks, like you said, naturally, in a genuine way, in an effective way, you need to have so much of the internal shifts, like expanding your band of operation, like you said, being bulletproof, untethering, anti-thetic thinking, no
Mm-hmm.
fundamental attribution error, no victim mindset. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many layers to it of internal shifts you need to have before you can even utter the first word that comes out of your mouth.
Oh, absolutely. And then I would try starting to use the frameworks, and then I realized, oh, I haven't changed enough. And I would just keep backing off and then working on the frameworks again. So I want to say it actually took, man, I had to change a lot of things. It took me 9 months to really get into the campaigns
Okay.
and
Yeah.
into the frameworks, because that's how much I had to change. Because even once I changed things with fundamental attribution error and all of those things, then I still had trouble with like over talking. Like
Mm.
I could just not play the frameworks out because I couldn't wasn't a good listener. Then I had to go back and I had to use the auto suggestions so that I could be a better listener. And then finally, almost 9 months later, I could use the frameworks.
Mm.
Which is
You
which is
feel it.
why you haven't, yeah, which is why you haven't seen me post, in the
It's
Facebook
good.
group, oh, here's my hedge, here's my,
Yeah.
because I've been working on internal shifts for that long, and I really had to. And finally I could do the paraphrasing, and finally I could do that stuff, because finally I could just be quiet and just listen to people and be curious and not be just so impulsively waiting for my time to talk.
Yeah.
And he really needed me to listen to him. And then once I could do that, things just turned that's when things dramatically turned around, because then I could be responsive to his needs.
Mm.
Right, once I could listen to him, and once I could really genuinely play out the frameworks and actually listen to people and identify what they need, then I could be responsive to that. And once I could be responsive to that, then he really turned around with me.
Yeah. And
And it
and I
happened
believe that.
very
And I
quickly.
and it happens very quickly. Like, it
It
happens
happened
in
very
my
quickly.
relationship too, where, we're going to talk about this later too, about just becoming the leader first, who
Hmm.
starts the change. And you'll be shocked when you do that properly, how much that lifts your partner up too, which makes it easier for you to lift yourself up and then lift him up again. And before you know it, both of you are just like skyrocketing up. And that happened in my relationship. That happened to every single interview that I do. It's a lot of nothing because you guys are doing the internal work. And then once you're ready to perform and perform for real, boom, the flywheel just turns so quickly in the positive direction.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and you were telling me about a date that you guys had in a a
I can't
lakeside date. Like, I mean, it's just amazing.
I can't even believe it. Like, yeah, and it all started with the frameworks, because I was able to, talk to him and, use the frameworks, use the hedge, which is so powerful. It really is one of the most powerful aspects. And then just listen to him. And then from there, I was able to identify something that he needed, that he wanted to come to me for, but he couldn't. Like, he was afraid. But I was able to identify that need, and then I was able to fulfill that need. And then it just sort of turned everything around. And then next thing I know, he was contacting me and saying that he wanted to take me out for my birthday to celebrate, and he wanted to pick me up, and he wanted to be intimate again. And we had a date that lasted all day. A year after, almost a year to the day, really, was when I bought your program. And I just like could not believe it. I couldn't believe it.
Um, so I want to talk about your initial that comment that you made to me about like you thought you signed up for a timeshare, it was like a big scam. Tell me
Yeah.
what you were thinking when you first gave your payment to Jason. You
I
enrolled
was
in the
like,
program. Like, what was going through your mind?
I was like, what have I just done? Like, I basically watched like an infomercial for 45 minutes and then just like handed over my credit card number to a total stranger and bought a $3,000 program. No
So
idea what's
it's
in
now
this.
a lot more than 3,000, by the way. So you joined at
It's
like at a
more.
good time. Yeah, a lot more
I
than
said
3,000 now.
I've heard it's gone up.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And hey, inflation, right? Like,
But
and
as we make our program better, we're gonna charge more too, you know.
right.
Yeah.
And so I haven't stopped doing the program. So I kind of like went through it and then I just keep going back and watching the videos. So I've seen the changes like, oh, this is new. Like I've seen the improvements, I've seen the changes, I've seen the additional suggestions and I use them. So as you're improving the program, I'm rewatching the videos.
Oh.
And it's like it's like some people go to church, I go to the videos. It's I'm serious. I'm
So what
serious.
was the
It's like my
moment
church.
that's actually something I think about whenever, because for people who don't know, whenever I would revamp the program, I would actually replace all the videos that we
Yes.
have. And so people who are pretty advanced, they would usually have to rewatch it because it's all different now. So
Right.
you're actually one of the ones who actually go back and go, okay, let me revisit this new version as if I don't know anything. That's amazing.
Right.
That's
It's
amazing.
it is. And I just like sit there and I like watch these videos. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I need to like there was things that you added for like intrusive thoughts. And I still have a lot of problems with like thought intrusion.
Mhm.
So I just still do a ton of work with my bulletproof vest every day
So you're talking about
in
the seat of consciousness and just observing and
this,
yeah.
going to the seat of consciousness, observing. And I work in a job, and we can talk about this, that, like I'm a paramedic and I work in an ambulance. And I always thought that I was a leader. Oh, I'm a leader. I lead, I get on scene, I lead the scene, I lead my EMTs because that EMT paramedic dynamic, you usually have the older paramedic, more and more as I progress, there's a 20-year age difference. Like
Mm,
they're children. They're like 20, 21. They're scared. They're
yeah.
excited, but they're scared. They don't want to mess up. And we have such turnover in the industry that the EMTs turn over almost every 6 months. Like there's that much attrition. So they're always new. So I'm always working with people who are not only, I've never worked with them before, but also new at the job. And I was terrible, Jeff. Like I was not a leader. Like there were EMTs who liked me. There were some who liked me, but there were a lot who were like, oh, like she's terrible. Like she'll like tear you apart. Like
Yeah.
she's just like vicious. Like
Yeah.
the things I would say, like, and I could not lead. And that negative flywheel, like, and if you cannot sit next to somebody for 12 hours in the ambulance and make that shift go well, you cannot be in a relationship.
Yeah.
You cannot be in a relationship. Like you
Mhm.
can't sit next to someone for 12 hours, lead them, be the leader, soothe their fears, identify their resistance, respond to their resistance, teach them, bring them along, lead on a scene call where it's
Mm,
like, there's a trauma or it's really stressful, and like lead people and bring everybody up. You can't be in a relationship. The negative flywheel will take over. They can sense it. They can sense all of that. And now I'm that paramedic that like apparently somebody was telling like all the EMTs want to work with. Like everyone's trying to sign up for my shifts.
That's good.
Like they're
Wow.
excited. It's great. It's
Yeah.
great. They're brand new EMTs are excited to work with me. And I had sort of a situation where I accidentally made an EMT cry last week. It was a really stressful call. And she was like very, very sensitive, a very, very sensitive person. And someone that like a lot of paramedics have had trouble working with and has a lot of trouble struggling on scene, has a lot of trouble. I'm gonna touch my ear pod. I don't want to turn it off. Hang on. Okay, there we go. I did it. And I knew this, but I really want to be someone that everybody can work with. And that's sort of like you talk about you need to be someone you can be in a relationship with anybody. You can make
That's
always
true.
make it work.
And it's
And it's
funny
the
you say that.
same.
And it makes me think about a lot of people who say, for example, like, well, the only person in my life that doesn't really like me is my partner.
No, that's not
Everybody at
true. That's a
work likes
lie.
me. Everybody
No, they
at work,
don't.
like, yeah, my family likes
No,
me, whatever it is.
no.
First of all,
They
I don't
to
think that's
they
true,
tolerate you. Yeah.
but the funny thing I would say to them is like, yeah, but nobody knows you better than your partner, right? Like when you are at work, when you're with your family, they're only seeing a snippet of you. They don't
Right.
know the deepest, darkest secrets about you. They don't know how
Right.
messed up you are. They don't know what you do behind closed doors. Only your partner
Right.
knows that. So
Well, I would say that's true in an office environment. I would say in an ambulance environment, your EMT knows you
yeah, very well.
really well. You're because you're sitting like a foot and a half from each other,
I can
and they're
imagine.
seeing you under stress. They're seeing you tired. They're seeing you hungry. They're seeing you at your worst. They're seeing you at your best. They're
Mm,
seeing you when you've got a patient that's just pushing your buttons, right? Like you're trying to get them in the ambulance and they don't want to go, and they're on drugs and you're trying to talk to them and you're trying to be nice to them and so the EMTs, they see
I know.
everything.
That's true. That's a good point.
It is very similar to a real relation, like a intimate relationship. It's very, very intimate. But like back to this EMT, right? Like I made her cry. And in the past, I would have just like dug in, like, no, I'm right. They're a terrible EMT. They need to get with the program. And man, you know what? I was able to turn that day all the way around. I was able to
Awesome.
identify exactly what she needed from me, how she needed me to communicate with her, what she needed me to do to help her. And then we just brought that day up like this. And
That's
by the
awesome.
end of the day, I had her laughing. And she still made mistakes. Yeah, she almost let the ambulance run out of gas.
Oh.
Like,
Ooh, yeah.
we were fine. We
Um,
were almost ran out of gas, which is like you never let the ambulance run out of gas
yeah.
because you always have to be ready. And I'm just like, oh, let's just we'll be fine. Just top it off. Like a lot of paramedics would have just been like,
But yeah.
we're
So
we're
that was like a
done.
good like trial by
Yeah.
fire for you and you understanding how to apply the
Yes.
program in like a very highly stressful situation, etc. And
Yes.
at what point and what were the catalysts for you to eventually trust this program to the full capacity, to the full extent that you did eventually? Like what was the things you saw, the things you told yourself that made you go like, this is it?
So I remember the moment. So like I'm doing like the stuff to be bulletproof. I'm doing all of the stuff. I'm writing everything down. Okay. Figuring out what I need to work on. So I remember the exact moment it happened. I was in a training situation. So I had a huge problem with FAE bias.
Hmm.
Are you still with me?
Yeah. If you could pause here, make sure your phone is charged to make sure like it doesn't shut off at any point. Just to check in.
Hang on. There we go. All right.
Perfect.
I think somebody was trying to call me.
Yeah.
So I remember exactly that moment. So I was really into the second part where we're working on being bulletproof. And I'm like, okay, I'm like doing all of this, doing like working on the auto suggestions, like doing all of this. And then I was in a training scenario at work And I used to have just such terrible like FAE bias. Like I was really had like just I would just sit there and just have this like negative loop
Mm,
constantly playing in my mind. Like we were really like a slave to this like negativity, and it would just play out constantly. And I remember I was working with a coworker that another paramedic that I really did not respect very much. And had really just, every time I would see her, I was just like, oh God, her, like and I'd been on a couple of calls with her, like stat calls, and I was just like, oh my God, like
yeah,
this person. Like,
yeah.
and I was in this training scenario and I saw her, like working through this training scenario, like working to understand what we were doing. And in that moment, the negativity had stopped.
Mm,
The loop had stopped. And in that moment, I was in the seat of consciousness that we talk about. And I was observing myself without even trying. It was
mhm,
just happening. I wasn't even going there, like, okay, I'm going to the seat of consciousness now. Like, I was observing myself, observing her, not with contempt, not with like derision, but with like humanity. And I could see her humanness and see her just as another person, just working through things, working to understand, trying to learn, doing her best. And in that moment, I didn't know who I was anymore. It was almost like a existential crisis
yeah.
because I no longer recognized my own thoughts. And in that moment, I was like, this is real. Like this is real. And and then I just committed even harder to it. And it was like this, and I remember trying to talk to it was like this weird experience. I called up my brother who's really deep into meditation, who's also a doctor. Um, and who's been meditating for years and who's familiar with the seat of consciousness. And I explained it to him. He's like, yeah, that's you're changing. And it's hard because in the Western world, like we don't really acknowledge that these changes are possible, that the seat of consciousness is a place that you can go to. Like it's very common in Eastern philosophy, like this idea that you can step back and observe yourself and observe your thoughts, but in the Western world, it's very I centric. And so it's hard to kind of undo that and move away from that I myself, that
Right.
centricity and do that. And once you have managed to change yourself, change your brain and do that, the changes are just so profound. And anything is possible because you're no longer a slave to your thoughts and you're no longer a slave to that negative loop. And that is freedom. And that is you're really breaking free at that point, and that is real change.
Yeah. And so that was the moment. I think the moment every single process that I teach you, like for example, the moment I untethered, for example, the moment I got rid of my victim mindset, a lot of it,
Mhm.
the moment I was actually bulletproof, and the moment I found the seat of consciousness, all those moments I actually wept in my legit wept because I have
I
been feeling
wept.
such
I
like
wept.
yeah, because it's such
Yeah.
a like you've been living life in such a way that you thought was right for so long. And once you feel what the right way is, you realize like, oh my God, this is so blissful. This is so transcendent. I don't know how to describe it. It's
Right.
like, whoa, right? It blows you away. And I think that's that was the moment I think for me when I became convinced of my own processes. But I think that's also when you became convinced of like, okay, this is legit shit. Like this is no joke.
This is a real deal. By the point where you don't even know who you are anymore because the things that you're teaching in the program, they work and they completely overhaul your personality. The changes are real. You don't even know who you are anymore.
Mm. But
Like
what's funny is like
but it's a beautiful thing because it's such an amazing thing. I'm sorry,
yeah.
go on.
the funny thing, the hard part that we have is there are two challenges that we have on that, right? Because like people can be listening to this about us talking about the seat of consciousness, for example, and they can have an idea of what that feels like, right? And so they're thinking like, okay, it would be nice, I guess, if you have the seat of consciousness. But I don't think most people understand just how nice that is, right? That if you understand the bliss behind that, you'll go like, oh my God, like there's no way I don't want that, right? Because people, again, they're thinking from their level 1, and from level 1, they can only see level 5, but they can't see level 50, right? And so people look at this and they look at the work, for example, that it takes to get to the SOC, seat of consciousness. And they go like, is this work really worth it to get to 1 to 5? Not really. But I don't think they understand that it's not just 1 to 5. This is like 50, right?
Right. This is infinity, right? Like and it just keeps progressing. It just keeps going. And the day of my birthday, usually, I always, which is, so the day I contact you is the day after my birthday. So usually, I'm always kind of depressed on my birthday. It's always kind of like, oh. And the one thing I noticed, and it was just, so it's just about exactly 1 year, is how happy I am. And a lot of times I'm like sitting in the car, or I'm sitting in traffic, or I'm just parking, like doing something very mundane. And I cannot believe how peaceful I feel and how much joy I feel, just like, wow, it's so beautiful. Like, look at the sky. Look at these people just walking by, these children, I'm like, who are you? Like, I don't know who this
I
is.
love it.
And then just all of these everyday moments. There's so much joy in them. There's so much bliss in them. I was in this weird thing, like every day I had this weird loop in my brain. I would, I all in one, be miserable, right? I would be miserable. I was miserable every day, like just sort of this low level, glass half empty misery, which is I was really depressed. And at the same time, dreading dying, which is such a weird, like, well, you're miserable. Why are you afraid of dying? You want to you're like, oh my God, I'm so afraid to die. Like, I'm like, you're like, why would you want to prolong your life? You're like miserable, full on unhappy every day of your life, joyless, and at the same time, you're like, oh God, like one day I'm gonna die, and I'm so afraid of this. It's such a weird thing.
And the thing is, like, again,
It's
going back to the
bizarre.
levels, right? You don't know how unhappy you are until you feel that happiness, right? You don't
Right.
know. You can't put that into
Right.
perspective. Like, I remember when I was really unhappy, that unhappy stage of my life, the miserable stage of my life, I justified my misery. I convinced myself that my misery was normal. I convinced
Right.
myself that my misery was okay, right?
Right.
But
Right. And I know,
until, yeah,
and then you had like kind of a hard life growing up, right? And I did too. And I think a lot of people who had like a hard upbringing or didn't have a lot of support or poor, like, well, I deserve to be miserable. Like, I've earned this. Like,
yeah, yeah,
it's
it's
like a
like that
badge of
martyr
honor. Like,
feeling. Like,
I'm hard.
I'm hard, I'm a martyr. Like, I went through some shit. Like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm scarred everywhere. Like, yeah.
They like, and that's why, because nobody loved me. Now everybody else is gonna be miserable too.
But it's a movie trope. It's a media
Right.
trope of like the
Right.
man who's like, or the woman who's so hardened, but they're
Right.
cool, they're cool.
Right. You can hear the blues. The blues are like playing in the background as like the trash rolls across the street in your
That's
internal
great.
movie.
That's great. But back to the thing, the other issue I also have is like, you actually have to do the program almost a bit blindly sometimes at first, until you feel that the proof of that, right? Then that conviction happens, and that conviction will fuel your further addiction to the processes. But the problem is, like, a lot of people, they don't even allow the process to ever be a conviction, right? They come into the program, for example, and they say to us, I trust you guys, but really they don't. So
They
they
don't.
vaguely do the program, they do the program half-assed, and
Yes.
then they don't feel the results. When they
They
don't feel the
don't.
results, it further feeds back into like, I don't feel conviction for this process, and then don't do it even more, and it's just
Right.
a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing.
Right. And their
Um,
partners can sense it. And a lot of
yeah,
times, I've talked to these members and I've talked to members where and they're probably getting some change. And, oh, people really say that, they can see changes in me. They say that they can see changes in me, but your partner doesn't, right? Like the person who's living with you every day,
yeah,
they're still playing the victim. They'll want to role play or they'll kind of want to like talk, because we connect with a lot of the members. And I'm like, I'll tell them like, I don't think you're ready for the framework. I was always that person in the group, like,
yeah.
man, I don't think you're ready for the frameworks because you just blew up at somebody at work. You were posting about that. You like lost it and started screaming at everybody. And
And it's just the levels again, and this kind of the
right,
first big point I want to discuss is really like, what is the degree of change you're talking about, right?
right,
So I can't tell you how easy it is to get your partner to say, I see you're changing. You did that within the first month. It's so
right,
easy to get them to say that, right?
right,
Because you could just be like 5-10% better and it's like, yeah, you're better.
right,
But for people to actually emotionally feel that, to emotionally take action on that, to put money where their mouth is, kind of thing,
right,
right? To really say, like, oh, you have changed and I'm drawn to it. That's a
right,
very vast distance. And it's almost like
right.
the analogy I have is, a lot of entrepreneurs, because I mentor a lot of entrepreneurs now who are newer. They always tell me, Jeff, a lot of people tell me though about like, they think my philosophies and my teachings are very good. Then I ask them like, but are they taking out their credit card and paying you?
Right.
No. Well, doesn't matter. The same thing, right? So my partner's telling me how much I've changed. Well, great. But are they dedicating their one and only life and deciding it to want to spend it with you? No.
Right.
Then you're not changing. And then another
Right.
analogy before I let you go on is like, it's like, imagine you have a cooler in your house right now. And someone knocks on your door and says, hey, I have a cooler that's about 5% better than yours. Who cares? But if you're
Right.
like, I have this refrigerator, it's a smart refrigerator, it can talk to you, you can talk to it, it will regulate the temperature for you, it will tell you what's in the fridge, it will just, you don't need to put ice in it every single time. It's 10x better than what you have here. Oh yeah, get the fridge out of here. Get
Let's
the cooler
go.
out of here. Let's go. Right? And that's kind of the level that I want people to understand is like, when we talk about creating safety, when we talk about creating admiration, when we talk about creating passion, when we talk about creating your internal shifts, untethering, it's not just like, I sometimes play victim, I sometimes don't play victim, I'm better than what I was before. No, you need to be 10x better, right?
Right.
10x, like you need to transcend yourself, kind of thing.
I was watching an interview with your partner, Chris Blundell, and he was talking to another member, and I think he put it best. And I think I got to this point too, right? So there's your 1 month changes, and then I feel like there's your 6 month changes, and then there's like your 1 year change. And hang on, I'm gonna adjust this. And he was saying this person was like a little down and discouraged, and Blundell was sharing with him, at the point where I got to the 6 month mark in the program, you like, I could stop, like I could just be here, right? Stay, just not put so much work in it anymore. But when you coast, right, where are you going?
Yeah,
You never coast up. We only ever coast down.
yeah.
So he's like, but he came to a decision where if he could be this much better and this different at the 6 month mark, where could he be at the 1 year mark?
Mm,
Right.
mm,
And I remember like watching that and being like, yeah, you know, and then just being like, we got to keep going. We're going to keep going. We're like doubling down, right? We're doubling down on the changes. And I still had not been able to leave the whole part of your program where you work on the internal shifts at 6 months. Remember, it was 9 months for me. It was 9 months, before I could move on and actually successfully start playing out the frameworks and actually have a conversation with somebody and like really deeply listen to them and be responsive to them and be responsive to my partner in a very deep way. And so if I had stopped at the 1 month mark, if I had stopped at the 6 month mark, if I had not just kept going and going and going all the way through, I just like, I don't know, like I would have just shorted myself,
Yeah.
and just like shortchanged myself.
It makes sense.
So
And it's almost like, like everything in life is such a momentum thing, right? Everything is feedback loops. We talk about this, how, the difference between really successful people and really average people is actually very tiny, right? They may even like be 1% different every single day, but the 1% compounds every single day. And if you compound 1%, 365 days every single day, one person will be 37x better than the other one, right? And so people always whine about like, why does the 1% exist, right? And why is the rich so rich and why is the average so average? And you can not think about this as just money. You can think about this as just like happiness, as relationship quality, whatever it is, because the people who are up here, they have let things compound for so long. Everything they do, everything they think, every decision you make, everything you think about, everything you say, right? Everything you say matters. It compounds so much. And so when you're down here and you're looking up at the people who are like, have been compounding for years, you only have yourself to blame. You have to look at like the millions, the countless of thoughts, decisions, the way you wasted your time, the way you use your time, right? The things you focus on, the things you don't focus on, the things you blame, like even something as innocent as playing victim for like 30 minutes a day. For a lot of people, that's not even a big deal, right? So for the people you were talking to, right? Yeah, I played victim and I had FAE and I had a altercation with my employee.
Right.
For them, that's not a big deal. But for me, it's a big deal. If I spend 5 minutes, Elisa, in a non-thriving state, I fucked up my day. I know that. My standard is like that high, right? 5 minutes, that's it. While most people, they can be feeling bad for 30 minutes to be like, that's normal, right? It's just different standards here.
Right. If I'm with you. It bothers me so much. Like if I have like dark thoughts that I'm not managing, or I have a situation like with that, the EMT, I'm like, you're better than this, right? Like turn this around.
Not tolerating
like,
that. Yeah. I'm
no,
not tolerating
do not tolerate this don't tolerate it in yourself.
Yeah.
Like don't like, like you had a moment, you were stressed out, right? You were wrestling a patient on the gurney and you had another paramedic and the whole situation was falling apart and everything was totally out of control. And then you yelled at your EMT and then they cry, like, no, you failed. You failed.
Own it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not, there's no excuse. There's no, well, see, it was a very difficult situation, right? Like that's life. It's all full of just a series of difficult situations. Like the entropy is always there, right? Like like you just, like that's how it is. And you're not being judged by your best moments. You're judging yourself by your worst moments. And you got to keep, right? It's raising those lowest tides.
Raising those lowest tides. And so for people who
Right.
haven't joined the program yet or have joined the program and you're listening to this, remember, right? Everything is about the standards you have, right?
Right.
If you feel like you're ever good enough and you're saying like, oh, I've grown enough, you have to compare yourself by what standard? By what standard? Sure, you're better than who you were before, but are you irreplaceable yet? Who are you comparing yourself against, right? Are you comparing yourself against the best? Are you comparing yourself against some Joe Blow?
Right.
Who are you comparing? Right. And when you realize like the best of the best out there, the best of the best out there, right? they're always raising their lowest tides. They have very low tolerance for low standards. And this applies to like how you do the work in the program, how you do your work in your workplace, how much victim mindset you allow. Some people,
Even
for example,
even
yeah,
how I invest, even how I
even
invest
how
my
you
money.
invest, yeah,
Jeff, and this is crazy. Like, I have made so much money in the stock market. Let's just talk about that for a minute. Because it used to be like, oh, the stock market's rigged, like heavy victim,
rigged,
it's rigged.
yeah,
It's rigged. Nobody can make money. Only big investment firms can make money. You know, and with the program, you can go to the SOC too. If you lose some money, now I've started doing that. Like if I make an investment and it goes south, instead of being emotional or playing the victim mindset, I can stay back. Like, did you do your due diligence? Did you read everything you could about the company? Did you really look at the spreadsheet?
yeah, yeah.
Dev, I looked at my portfolio. It's up like $3,000 in the last couple hours. Like,
Yeah,
and it's like it's weird how this program will touch every aspect of your life, because now I can even go to the SOC and I can take a step back and really think about even things like, how am I investing and using my money? And like and before, like I was spending like all my money like on nonsense and garbage to make myself feel better. And now I don't need to do that, and now I can invest it. But now, that I'm investing it, now I can like invest it wisely,
wisely.
like do things that make sense. It's not impulsive anymore. And now all of a sudden, like I'm like making thousands of dollars every day, making
Yeah.
my money make money.
No,
Like
interesting you say
I'm
that.
sure you
And
can relate to this. Yeah.
I can definitely can because I
Yeah.
announced it to the group too, like, and I use it for a lot of my examples. Like I've been dabbling in investing myself, right?
Right.
And to this date, and this is after 3 weeks of really bear market, right? I made
Yeah.
450 grand in 4 months, right? And I said that, and it was
In a
like
secular bear market, my portfolio went up
still up.
20%.
And so what's funny is like, we talk about how the principles in the program apply to everything you do. Think about untethering,
Everything.
for example. There's no better skill to have to untether than investing,
Yes.
right? Because you really literally
Yes.
need to play the long game. You literally need to
Yes.
do things because you believe in it. You are intrinsically addicted to it, not for the outcome. Because if you're doing it for
Right.
the outcome, you're gonna be in for a wild roller coaster, right?
Right. Right.
Um, like
Right.
you
You can go to
literally,
you
yeah,
can go to any Yahoo chat, finance chat, and watch people catastrophizing and making terrible emotional decisions because their stock has turned, right?
yeah.
And they're pulling out and they're losing, I mean, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. And like, you're like, I still believe in this. I'm in it for the long run.
And
I
then
believe in this company. You wake up one morning and it's going like this, and I'm
and
like,
that's exactly like relationships, right? We told
right,
you in relationships, when you
exactly.
start to change, you will face what we call the paradox of change. Things will
Hmm.
dip. And if you're
Yes,
weak minded, if you're tethered minded, like most people, you're going to give up at the wrong time, at the
yes,
worst time.
at the
And
worst
you're never
time.
going to see how the potential of things because you
Right,
give up at the worst time. It's almost like investing too, right?
right,
There's like a philosophy where like you want to invest on the way down,
right,
right? So when things are going
right,
down, so you buy here and it goes down
right.
further, you buy more and you buy more, and it feels like shit, right? Because like you're
Terrible.
losing, you're losing.
I'm buying the dip, but the
I'm
dips
buying
keep
the dip,
dipping.
right? But then a lot of people are too weak minded to where they sell at the bottom.
It's
Then they
terrible.
point out it
They're
goes
their
up, right? It's just oh
right.
my god.
They're their own worst enemy.
They're their own worst
Just
enemy. And
like
same thing in
and they
relationships because they're too
right,
tethered. They're too tethered,
right.
tethered, right?
Right. And they're
Um,
making these crazy emotional, the entropy just kills them. And
yeah,
that's what it is. It's about the entropy
it is.
and not having that mindset where you're just like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so the second thing I want to really make land with people is, I get a lot of questions, Lisa, like, but again, my partner is saying I've changed, but they're not running back to me. They're not like coming
Yeah.
back though. They're not doing this though, and they're seeing other people though. They're still thinking about going to other people though. They're still wanting to be single though. It doesn't seem like she really wants to be with me though. I would say to you guys, like, if you're still worried about petty shit like that, like petty questions like, how do I manufacture contact? How do I get her to like me? How do I get her back? If you're still worried about petty stuff like that, it means you have barely changed. You think you have, but your change is not 10x. Because if you were 10x, right, your partner will run back to you.
Yeah.
Will run back to you, right? And they will stay with you no matter what. Like my partner, for example, I never sleep with one eye open, right? I never worry about other people in the picture, whatever. Who cares?
No.
They're all kindergartners, right? Compared to what we have.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you become 10x, if you actually become 10x in your level of safety, you can create the 5 pillars, the internal shifts, you are no longer in the game, right? You transcend the game now. You're in your own league now, right? So if you're worried about silly questions like, what should I do right now? It means you're still in the game. You're still worried about the competition, right?
Right.
You haven't transcended the game yet. You need to transcend the game. And that's the standard we want you to get to, you know?
Absolutely. And that's this thing, like, I don't even worry about it, right? Like, you know, with my partner and I, there's still a long way to go. Like, he's only just started to, like, you know, turn around, and he's also very busy, very judicious with his time. You know, he's things that he's working on. He's pre-med. It's an incredibly busy, and you know,
my
because
wife,
your partner was pre-med. Your wife now your wife is pre-med. I was also pre-med, and it's just like, it just sucks up all of your time trying to get into med school, and it's make or break. And so that he would even give one day to me, right? That he could be spending, you know, studying for like the MCAT. Right.
It's intense. Yeah.
It's really intense. And you know, and I just don't work. I don't, you know, like, there's no need to rush. I don't need to like do things and make ploys to get his attention, you know. And now he feels safe. He's like, you know, school started again. I'm really busy again. And I'm like, oh, thanks for letting me know. Right. Like, now he feels safe sharing this with me, because before that was a huge point of contention. Like, he like, I'm really busy right now. I really have to study. Like, it's all make or break. And I would just freak out on him. And now I'm like, oh, that's great. You do your thing, because I'm so untethered, and there's just no rush. I'm just living in the day. And now I also have my own stuff going on because of all the work that I've done. You know, I didn't have any friends before. I didn't have a group to hang out with. I now have a friend group. I now have stuff. I now have more hobbies, more interests. I now enjoy my time alone, and there's none of that pressure. And it's just so much. It's just a world of difference, right? It's the way to live, where you're like, how good you feel is tethered on whether or not somebody can give you their time or not, is not the way to live your life.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting you say that, because like, I see the evolution within you too, last year to now, because, you know, a lot of people ask me too, well, Jeff, I'm scared to give my partner space. I'm scared. And I asked them like, well, why are you scared? Let me tell you why you're scared. Because you're scared she might find someone else better.
Right.
But if you're scared because she might find someone else better, don't say like, well, I'm not going to improve myself, but I'm going to try to figure out a way to pull her in. That's weird, right? If you're scared she's going to find someone else better, then be better so that she cannot find someone else better. And once you are actually better, that peace of mind you get, that security you get, that confidence you get, that actually begets more success, because now you can talk from that place of power, that place of comfort, that place of confidence, that place of like bulletproofness, that place that actually makes people feel safe, that makes the good things a self-fulfilling prophecy. That can actually happen now. Right. And that's the way to live. And so if your partner's wanting space and you're trying to figure out how to rope her back in, you missed the whole point. You missed the whole point.
You missed the point. Right. You've missed the point. Right. Yeah. You've definitely missed the point of the program, for sure.
Oh, you definitely missed the point of what this
Of
event is trying to
everything.
tell you, even,
Right.
right? That like,
Right.
if you were that irreplaceable, first of all, your partner would not need space from something that she loves being around with. And
Right.
if you're scared to give your partner space because you don't believe in your own value, then there's no point convincing yourself that you're high value, whatever it is. Who cares? Right?
Right.
You're not.
Right. You're not. You're not.
Um,
And you'll see it. You'll see the changes because I mean you'll become irresistible to everybody, right?
mm.
And that's the thing about the program. I had like 3 guys ask me out in 1 week. Like it was like no, 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 no,
Hopefully it's not in your
no,
ambulance, right? It's like, oh my
no.
God, I'm in
That
pain.
happens too. Sometimes it happens too. You're like, no. Like, I've had patients ask me out,
Yeah.
and it's just like because actually I did have a couple patients ask me out, and it's just you just because you're just exuding this like the calm, the warmth, everybody can feel it, right? You're like a warm sphere. Your patient feels it, your partner, your EMT feels it, the other people on scene feel it, whoever they are, the sheriffs, the police officers, the firefighters, the patients definitely can feel it.
Mm.
The people at the hospital feel it. Like everybody can feel, and people just are commenting, oh gosh, you're so calm. I love the sound of your voice. It's so soothing. It's so calm. Like I would feel so calm if I were the patient right now. The patient feels calm. Like, and who can resist that?
Mm.
Who doesn't want to be around someone who's happy, who's warm, who exudes calmness, who exudes a caring feeling? Like everybody wants to be around that.
Yeah.
Right? Once you make those real changes, you're not gonna have to like try to like, get your significant other into like your tractor beam and like pull them back in. Like it's like,
Yeah. You
Darth
mentioned
Vader
something.
trying to pull
Yeah. And you mentioned something
everything into
interesting
the
in
Death
your
Star, right?
you
Right.
mentioned something interesting in your write-up, which is like you used to read a lot of books about like what it means to attract the opposite sex. And
Yes.
you mentioned too how they all are coming from this insecure place of playing some manipulative things to
Right.
basically make your partner feel insecure so that they'll pick you. Tell me more about those things like that you
Yeah, I think, for men on YouTube, so I feel like this is sort of like that, juxtaposition because I see your interviews with men and men have like the opposite. Like they're reading or listening or watching toxic material that plays into this hyper masculinity. So women have sort of this opposite thing where there's equally toxic material, toxic relation advice that encourages women to play into sort of this toxic feminine
Mm.
behavior where the only advice that you get as a woman is like stuff books like The Rules or like Why Men Like Bitches, which encourages women, right, to kind of play like the coquette, to play games with the people that they're interested in. For example, like, you'll find like a high value man, right? Like we talk about the high value man. And then they're used to being like, oh, oh, I'm so high value, right? And then you find that man and you try to date that man, but they're used to women just being like, oh, and then instead of being like, oh, you like cancel dates at the last minute, kind of pull the rug out
Oh
from
yeah.
under them. Yeah, and kind of unsettle them and unseat them, and you win men over by playing these games, by playing hard to get, by being the coquette, by not being too available, and those are really like, the only that's really the only relationship advice I think exists for women. And even like the stuff my mom kind of brought me up with, she's like, honey, I know that those magazines you're reading,
Mm.
say that it's okay to be, like play a more masculine role in your relationship, take initiative and call them. But boys don't really want you to call them. Like, they
Yeah.
don't really like it when you do that. Like, they don't really like it when you're too needy or too available. And, boys really like it if you let them, do that. And so there's just a lot of this advice, but none of this really tells you how to be in a relationship, right? Like,
You know,
and
I
none of
made a
this really
video.
helps you.
Yeah, I made a video on this, and tell me what you think about this theory, right? Because like this is a
Sure.
theory. This is kind of like something I've recently. It's a new revelation, because I was having a debate with this person about like what it means to be attractive as a male, for example, right?
Right.
So a lot of people play these games because they think that being attractive is being either masculine or feminine, right?
Right.
But really, that's not what makes masculinity or femininity attractive. What makes it
Mhm.
attractive is what it symbolizes, which is that for a masculine figure, for example, you're the most attractive depending on how much safety you can create,
Yes.
right? But a lot of women, a lot of people, they see some very masculine man, for example, who's like successful and monetarily, has a lot of power, very dominant looking, very muscular looking, whatever it is. And they look at those surface traits and they think, if they can get the success on their own like that, and if they look like they can protect me, maybe I can feel safe, right? But
Mhm.
sometimes people get the money, people get the power, people get their dominance, not from this intention of safety, but because they're really toxic, right?
Yes.
Sometimes. And so a lot of women fall in love at first with men who appear
Yes.
masculine because they assume that they can feel safe. But then once they're in a relationship and they realize, oh shit, beneath this is not safety at all. In fact, they're really aggressive, they're really violent, they're really controlling and dominating, too much so. Once the safety is gone, they pull away. But a lot of
Right.
men don't understand this, so they see women pulling away and they think, well, I'm not masculine enough then. So they become even more hyper masculine and they push women away even more, which is why a lot of men, they can attract women, but they cannot keep women. And I think it's the opposite side
Right.
for women, where they try to be too feminine because they think that's what is attractive. Eventually the men realizes like this femininity is not real here. This is not giving me a lot of like feminine joy. And so they pull
Correct.
away.
Correct. And
And then women try to be more feminine. And it's like, it's a bad cycle.
right. And that happened in my relationship for certain. So I would really play into like traditional, ideas of femininity, cooking, cleaning, being nurturer, but it was sort of like it wasn't real. And my partner would just be like, I don't want you to do this. Like, I don't want you to clean the house. Like, I didn't ask you to cook for me. Like, all he wanted was for me to listen to him, right? To create a safe place where he could talk to me, to touch him, to be physical with him. Because for him, that's what creates safety. Like,
Yeah.
and that's what makes him feel cared about. He wants to be touched. He wants someone to connect with him emotionally. He wants to be able to talk to me. And I would just cook and clean like even harder. And he's just going like, no, like
Yeah.
this isn't what I want. And he's like, I'm like, I do so much for you. Like with I think the men in your program do this too, like, I make so much money. I provide all of this. Like I get this house for you, and it's still not good enough. And I was doing the exact opposite, but from a feminine, like, I cook all these meals for you and I clean the house from top to bottom and it's still not enough. And he's going like, but that's not what I want.
Yeah.
I just want you to make me feel safe. And I want you to talk to me and I want you to touch me and I want you to be gentle and like make me feel safe. And I want you to listen to me, please.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, cook more
Oh.
meals? Like
Yeah, it totally goes over. Yeah.
make more
But
make more spaghetti? Like
what's
not
funny is
not
like
connected.
I see these people playing all these games because I see the videos that teaches people like you should do this, you should do that. When a woman goes to you, you should say this back, and you can reassert your power, whatever it is. The way I see it is like this, right? It's like I watch all these guys playing the game when they're running around in their game field and they're like running around. They're like, oh my God, they're coming up with strategies. I'm winning, I'm winning. And then there's a whole group of people up here who is like over the game, transcending the game. They're not even in
Right.
the game. They're not even playing the game. They're just like up
About.
here and just observing
Right.
people playing this game. It's like, what the fuck are you guys doing?
I
Like,
know.
like yeah, like you're here like, oh my god, I'm winning the game. I'm saying this, I'm saying that. I have this new strategy.
Right.
What if
I read another book. I
yeah,
watched another YouTube video and I
there's a
no.
whole new level, guys, when you don't need that anymore. Like my partner and I, we never talk about any power struggle issues. We never talk about like feminine, masculine stuff. Like we're just like, let's just be great human beings who create safety for each other. Me in my own masculine way, you in your feminine way. That's sure that can be different. We talk a little bit about that. But besides that, it's just we never talk about, we never play these games, and we don't need these games to make us work, to like create some passion, to create some like intrigue, to create some mystery. We don't need all that stuff. Like we're just playing on
No.
a different rules here, right? And I find that funny, just seeing people like obsessed with these games, the rules. Like, what are you guys doing? It's really sad.
Yeah, this is not the way. This is not what people want in a
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to spend a minute on the paradox of change a bit, which is, you know, I think your partner, from the story you were saying, was really shocked when he said, like, I'm not gonna come back. I have no plans on coming back, but then you're still kind of in the program. And we talk about a lot about this in the program and in our videos too, of like, imagine you are a scientist and you're trying to figure out like, who is this person really? How can I trust the data points I'm getting? Right? You, as a scientist, you don't go, oh, hey, participants, you're being studied on this thing. Because if you tell them that, then you know that whatever they do is just to do well on the test. They're
Right.
faking it. So what do you
They're
do?
gaming it.
Yeah.
Right.
So you tell them like, hey, the test is kind of over right now. Please go to the other room and mingle with the participants. And then when they're mingling, when they think no one's watching them, then that's when you watch them, right? It's like, oh,
Right.
that's them.
Right.
And it's kind of your
Right.
partner's kind of doing the same thing, right? If your partner tells you, if you do A, B, C, D, I will come back to you. There is hope. Then your partner can no longer trust the data points, because now it's like, I don't know if you're doing this because I told you so. You're just trying to rig the system here, or you're doing this because that's who you are. But if your partner tells you it's over, and you still keep doing the great things you've been doing, then you go, well, there's no ulterior motive here. I don't understand. Like, that's who they are.
Right.
And that's where
Right.
so when people give up at the wrong time, which is when people tell them like, oh, it's hopeless, they're like, dude, you're missing the whole point. It's a shame.
Right. Right. And in fact, he started to become more, so even after that point, even when we were talking for hours, he came over and then totally unexpectedly, initiated intimacy with me, which was crazy because when he broke up, he was just like, I don't want to touch you. Don't touch me. I don't want to hug you. We're gonna sleep. And then we're like laying there and we're talking, and even still, it was like admitting that he sees the changes. And then he's asking me like, did you date other people? Like, did you date other people like when we weren't together? And I'm like, no, I'm just really just working on this program, like I really feel like I need to make all of these changes before I could even date anybody else, because otherwise all the same problems in this relationship will be in the other relationship. And then he's like, yeah, I tried dating, but it was, and then he admits to me, even then, he's like, I'm still not sure if I want to open the door with you again. And he was like, I guess I shouldn't have said that, after we just slept together. And I'm just laying there. I'm like, oh, that's okay. I'm like, anything you feel is fine. Like, and he's just like, what?
What?
He's like, and that is like the ultimate test. He's like, and I don't think he's deliberately testing you. I don't know how much of how they test us is subconscious or whatever. Like, I'm gonna go over there, have a nice time. And this was not this last time. This was before this. Like, sleep with her and then admit that I've been seeing other people and then tell her I'm still not sure I want to be back with her and then see what happens. Like, and I'm just like, no, that's fine. It's fine. You should be seeing other people. Like, that's great. You should be exploring other things. Like, it's totally okay if you're not sure. and anything you feel is okay. And he was just like, he was like, anything, he said out to me, he's like, anything I feel is okay. He's like, who are you? Like, it's just
And
like, they
I've
will
had a lot of,
test you and test you.
but they're not testing you like preemptively. It's not like saying
No,
like, let me devise this test to
no,
see.
no.
It's because I have a lot of interviews now with the female partners, right? And really what's going on in their minds is like, it's sort of like how you would feel trust with people, right? If you have troubles trusting someone, for example, the way you can trust them again is you look at like, okay, let's look at the 100 things they did in the last like month.
Right.
There's 99 things they did that's like, I could see why they could fake it. There's like our boss was around. They have like incentive to like do nice things, whatever. But then there's one thing where like, dude, I cannot see how they could fake that. Like literally everything was running against them, working
Right.
against them. There was no incentive, no motive for them to do this nice thing, but they did.
Right.
That's what makes you question. So it's not like you're devising all these tests. It's more like, let me just look back and observe and analyze everything they did. And let me look at the moments where they cannot fake the nice thing they did. That's when you look at it. But then the problem is like people are so tethered. People play the victim so much. People are so unbulletproof that every single time the moments come when they cannot fake it anymore, like their partner says the worst thing, the world is raining down on them, right? Which is, to me, is like the biggest opportunity you have to actually change someone's mind about you.
Right.
All the victim mindset, all the bulletproof vest issues, they just crumble them, and they cannot help but crumble. And so now, when you look back at the 100 things you did, I'm like, yeah, none of those things. And the one moment you could have done the right thing, you didn't do it. So whatever,
Right.
That's kind of the game.
Right.
It's like, that's why you need to be the internal shift needs to be so powerful, is because life will test you until you cannot fake it. And it's the moment where you cannot fake it anymore, right? You cannot possibly use willpower to fake it. That's what counts.
Yes. Yes. Yes, because there's no way to fake that.
There's no way to fake that.
No way to fake that.
And the moment for me, for my partner, when I did it was like, when my partner said like, there's no way I'm coming back to you, right? And I said to her like, hey, if I were in your shoes, I would totally understand why you would think that. And I proceeded to like tell her like, you should read the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But nonetheless, no matter what you choose to do, like I never want to hurt somebody else the same way I hurt you ever again. So I'm gonna just keep on doing what I'm doing. And she watched me keep on doing what I'm doing, and eventually she realized like, no, this is like real, right? And it has to be like that. So if you're listening to this and you're still asking the question, but what if my partner told me that's your time? That's your time to shine.
That's your time to shine.
And you are not shining because you're too busy asking stupid questions and not shining.
And
that's funny. 2 more things, really quick things about leadership and starting to change, right? So I always tell people, right? It's like people always ask me too. Well, why is it that I always have to do it? Why isn't my partner doing it? Like, what about them, right? And I always tell them like, imagine
them.
Yeah,
right.
And imagine you're talking to your CEO, and your CEO says, well, why is it me who always has to do this first? Why are my employees doing it? I would get the fuck out of there, right? That's not a leader, right? Imagine, you cannot imagine a leader saying that ever. Why would I have to start first?
Right.
Why is it always me?
Right.
So a leader just starts. And if you are saying that, you're not a leader. And there should be no mystery why your partner's leaving, kind of thing.
Right. And even like in the ambulance world, like I go to a lot of these different companies, and the people are like, usually if I'm showing up at your ambulance company, it's because everybody is leaving, and now you have to bring in traveling. And I can see immediately, and it's a lot of what you're talking about, like the people at the top in the hallway who work in the operations, they want their employees to come in on Christmas. They want their employees to come in. But they don't
want to.
And They don't want to. And they're like, I did my time in the ambulance. I did my time as a street medic. I'm done with that. But you should work 6 days a week. You should work 7 days a week.
Mm.
You should give up time with your family. And they never get out from behind the desk, and they never get themselves into an ambulance, and and all those employees, they are out
Out.
of there.
Yeah.
But then I go to an ambulance company that's fully staffed, like the one I came from, and it's Halloween, it's Christmas, we're at level 0, the crews are slim. The people in the office are getting out from behind the desk, and they're like driving the ambulance. They're like, get in, we're short staffed. And I'm like, you know what? Like, they're willing to get out from behind the desk. Some of them hadn't been in the field for like 10 years or more, but they are not too good to get in the trenches with the troops. I'm going to follow that person.
Yeah.
And that's what leadership, when I see that, that's what leadership is. And so it's the same thing in the relationship. Like, when I tell people about this program, they're like, but what if your partner's crazy? They always say that. Like, what if your partner's crazy? Like, what if your partner's the problem? What if, and it's just like, it's like the EMT. Like, I'm like, what if the EMT is the problem? What if they're the problem? And, I was talking to a supervisor after the situation with this EMT, and I was like, well, I changed. And you know how it is. Sometimes if you change, they change.
Yeah.
Right. And he was just like nodding, and he was like, thank you. And that's the thing. That's what I tell people. I'm like, okay, I tell people, like, do the program for 6 months to a year and really do the program. And if after you really do the program, your partner is still crazy, then you can say your partner is crazy. But sometimes you'll find that once you change, they change. And that basically what has happened is you are building yourself a crazy partner. You are making them crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I see that, like, build yourself a crazy girlfriend, build yourself a crazy boyfriend, and all the things that you didn't like in them, all those things, all those maladaptive behaviors, they just evaporate when you change.
It's true.
Because you're leading the relationship. You're setting the tone for the relationship. And now they change. In my situation, it went one step further. My partner was so inspired. I didn't like make him I sent him some of your videos on YouTube, and he watched some of those YouTube videos, but he was so inspired at the 6-month point, like, that he wanted to change too. He wanted to be able to change. And he went inside the program, and he started doing it. And he came back, and he started telling me things that he didn't like about himself, his fears of failure, the way that was impacting him, how he didn't want to be that way anymore, and how he was going to also change. And now he has been doing some of the things. I mean, I'm still really doing he's very busy, but he has done some of it because he wants to change. And it's amazing how much, once you change, once you're the leader, how much it just changes everything around you.
It's crazy.
Everything.
Because, like, the best leaders, like I always say, they don't try to change people. They try to change the environment that allows people to change their behavior to be easier. Right?
It's a systems approach.
It's a systems approach.
Yes.
And so for me, for example, like, my partner is doing things now that I never imagined she could do in the beginning of our relationship, right? She was always kind of like a bit non-committal, a bit wishy-washy in the beginning. Now she's the one, she, like, this house that we're living in now, she designed it from scratch herself, right?
Wow.
The whole wedding, she told me, like, don't plan the wedding. I'm going to surprise you with this wedding. And it was the most amazing wedding ever. Like, everything, like, she's so committed, right? She's so committed every step of the way. And I could never imagine that. And it's because, like, we both were just, like, creating the environment to allow each other to thrive,
Right.
So it's like a lot of people, their cycle is more of, if, like, they're doing a lot of things that drive their partner crazy, and their partner becomes kind of wishy-washy, and they go, well, I'm going to wait for her to commit to me first before I'm willing to commit to them.
Right.
People always say that, right? It's like, well, if they're not going to give me the time of day, I'm not going to give them the time of day. Well, why don't you just start? and see what that changes. And eventually you will see that people are giving you the time of day, kind of thing.
Right.
But if you have this attitude of like waiting for people to give you the time of day, to prioritize you before you prioritize them, well, she's saying the same thing. So just like it's just fucking forget it.
Nobody's giving. Like
Nobody's starting,
something's got to give, right? Someone's got to start, right?
Yeah. It's weird because I hear a lot of my friends saying the same
want
thing.
Everything. Yeah, people want everything on a silver platter. Like people don't want to work for it, and that's a huge thing. And people just want the whole world, everything to just fall into place for them, but they don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
Right. They don't want to get it started.
And they say if a relationship takes that much work, it's not worth it. It's not the right one.
Right.
Then maybe you're not meant for a relationship. Sorry.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah,
this is true because it's going to be work, and there's always going to be entropy, as you said, and there's always going to be things coming up, problems to solve together, and like.
But that's the fun part.
It is
the fun part. It's like picking up a video game and saying like, oh, I have to like kill enemies and like have conflicts. What's the point?
Right. I have to get to the big boss at the end and then kill it. What?
Like, no, that's the point of the game. Like you want to just like buy a game and then have the ending credits come on. I'm like, that's not a game. Like, you're missing the whole point.
Exactly.
Last thing, Elisa, is like the lifestyle performer of bust. And this is something I think you did a great job in, is like making everything such a lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
And, for me, the life, like making this a lifestyle, right, is one, it starts with obsession. Like when I made this a lifestyle, right, when I'm driving, the principles is what I think about. When I'm showering, the principles are what I think about. At work, the principles are what I'm relating work to about as well.
Yes.
Like my life surrounds around these principles, right? And because I do that, I geek out over that. I realize things faster, right? I do things more consistently. It becomes a deeper part of my identity, and I start to have all these results that makes me even more addicted to these things I'm obsessed about. And it's just like a lifestyle. Like you eat, sleep, breathe it. It's just part of you. And a lot of people will say that's obsessive, that's unhealthy. But no, like we are eating, sleeping, and breathing balance. We're eating, sleeping, and breathing like positive stuff, healthy stuff. That's like saying like, oh, you're, like imagine if your diet is like very balanced, very healthy, and you say like, I live and breathe a healthy lifestyle. And people say like, that's too obsessive. I'm like, what are you talking about? No, because part of this balance, part of this obsession is also obsessing about rest, obsessing about observing yourself, calming yourself, etc. So it's balanced, right? People don't get that.
It's very balanced.
What's that lifestyle like for you? Like how do you see it? How do you perceive it? Like when you're talking to people in the program, for example, who haven't made this a lifestyle, how do you see the difference, the juxtaposition there?
I mean, for one, I can tell they're still using willpower to get through everything. They're still in still in survival mode, right? I mean, let me try to answer your question. I mean, the things that really impacted me in this program in terms of making it a lifestyle was, raising those lowest tides and really just day in and day out. I'm not really sure. I mean, because I really committed. Once the changes started happening, more changes started happening. And then I got more committed to it. And the more committed I got to it, the more committed I got to it. And I feel like it's not really obsessive at all. I really geek out about it too, because I talk about it all the time. I'm like, oh, you should do this program. You should it's like, hi, have you heard of the healing powers of Jesus? Like, hey, have you heard of this program on YouTube? Like, you should totally look at that. Like,
that's funny. Oh god.
And we're like, you know, and I'll see somebody have a meltdown on scene, like, he really needs to do this program. Like, he just like flipped out. Like, he's not being a leader at all. Like, he's trying to manage this patient. He just freaked out, and everybody's like looking at him like, dude, like, and we're all going like, mm-mm. But like, I just like, like, it's a lifestyle. It has to be a lifestyle. And I was like really scared. I was talking to another person that you interviewed, Amanda, and I told her, like, man, I was really scared that, like, because I started participating a little less in the Facebook group, and I told her, I was like, man, I was really scared that then once I stopped participating so much, I would like just fall off, right? And I'm like, and I'm not, and I find myself still doing it every day. I'm still doing all the processes in the shower, when I'm driving, managing things. Like, if I'm starting to struggle with something, I have a process for it now. Like, if something's bothering me and I'm upset with somebody and I don't like how I'm reacting, I have a process for that. And she was like, yeah, because you made it a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like, it's part of you now. And I
The
was
thing
like,
is, like,
oh yeah,
yeah,
it's a part of me now. Like, it is a lifestyle. And there's no other way to do it. Like, the minute you stop making this a lifestyle, the minute you stop committing to this, I mean, it's just like not exercising, it not eating right, but also the program is all about those things. Like, because like I said, this program has impacted everything, like the way I exercise, the way I, eat, like how I examine the way I'm using my time. And like those things were really like, because you talk about this, the raising the lowest tides. I realized when I got to that, what an inefficient, lazy person I had become, in part because I was probably really depressed.
mm,
I could not get things done. I mean, I could not, I would spend more time thinking about doing something than it would take to do the thing,
yeah. And for
right?
people who are not
Like,
aware of this, raising the lowest tides, I just want to like give a snippet of the program, which is that
right,
it goes by this maxim, right? You will do nothing to achieve your dreams, but you will fight like hell to not breach your lowest standards. So the problem is, like, a lot of people, they have goals, they have dreams, but they don't make their goals and dreams into a low standard. So for example, right? Uh you you might notice, for example, okay, if you have $10,000 in your bank account, or maybe $50,000, I don't know. You're like, fine, right? You're not gonna save money. But then if you are down to like your last $500, you will do anything. You will fight sleepiness. You'll fight
right,
like hell to make sure you make
right.
money so you
You're
can
like
pay the
selling
next
your
month's rent.
body on the street. You're
Right.
doing everything.
Right. So the problem is, like, a lot of
Right,
people, their lowest standard is very low. So the threshold they allow their life to go to before they say, like, okay, now I'm willing to do something about it, is so low, right? When we say raising the lowest standard, it's like raise that threshold. So maybe instead of $500, now it's 50 grand in your bank. So when your bank reaches 50 grand, you're like, shit, I'm gonna do like hell. I'm gonna fight like hell to make sure it goes up from there. I'm not letting it go down even further. It's your raising your lowest hygiene standard. That's the key to
right.
motivation, to stopping procrastination, to being more productive, right? People are
Mhm.
having it all wrong. Like, their goals are useless, you know?
And so, we kind of talk about this. Your partner is looking at your micro changes, but they're also looking at your macro changes. And my partner was trying to make all of these changes in his life. He's going to school, he's improving himself, he's getting educated, he's making it happen, he's focused on being a doctor, and I'm not making any of these things happen. And I'm not even like parallel dreams. I'm like talking about it, but I'm not doing it. I'm not sitting down. I'm not studying. I'm not like moving up in my career, which generally involves more school and more studying. I'm not keeping the house clean. I'm not paying attention to my appearance. I'm not managing my time. Like, he's getting up, he's like managing his time, he's having his cup of coffee, he's working out a little, he's sitting down, like he's doing all of these things in part because he did something, not a program like this, but I don't want to give too much away about his personal life, but he did something, and he had to change an aspect of his life that involved like addiction,
Mm.
and part of that was like, instead of like, it's a little bit similar, like if you go to like AA or something,
Mhm.
you untether yourself from like your alcohol addiction or your drug addiction, and you retether yourself to good
Something else,
daily
yeah.
habits, like vacuuming every day, like having these routines. So he had already sort of, that aspect of him, he'd already managed to do things like that. But I didn't have like that sort of thing, and I didn't have that sort of structure. Um, when I started raising my lowest tides, improving my self-esteem, managing my time better, managing my weight better, managing my sleep better, managing my dedication to the program better, because it all feeds into itself. It's like, I'm not going to go one day without doing the program. I'm going to do it every day. I'm going to do
Mhm.
it every minute of every day. I'm going to do it in the car. I'm going to do it in the shower. I'm going to do it in the house with a mouse while eating green eggs and ham. Like, like, and then it just starts feeding into itself, and they can see that when he came over, because one of the things that was, I think the big cincher is, he's a very neat and clean person, and I was not a neat and clean person. But in your program, you talk about, like, as you move through the higher echelons of the program, you sort of move into this, who is your becoming self? Like, who are you becoming? Like, who are you? And then commit to that person. And then also the raising your lowest highs. And he was like, the house is so like organized
Yeah.
and neat and clean. And I talked about the program, like, well, part of the program is, managing your time, and how low self-esteem also really drags down the relationship. And I realized, like, my self-esteem was really low. I wasn't managing my time. I'm not achieving anything. I'm not dedicated to my becoming self. And he was said, I went through that too when I went to like AA. And he was like, he's like, he confessed to me that he used to just sit around the house and just look at, the dishes in the sink and all the stuff that needed to be cleaned. And it would just like eat at him and make him feel terrible and guilty, but still couldn't get the motivation to change it, right? And then had a similar thing, and I was like, yes. And part of my becoming self is like, and we're almost saying it in unison, like, I am a neat and clean person, right? And
Identity
and
shifting,
I'll like
shifting the
walk,
identity
yeah,
level.
and
Yeah.
I'll like will walk through the house, and I'll like look at stuff, the dishes in the sink, and I'll go, I am a neat and clean person, and just start doing it. And there's just so much joy in being a efficient person, a neat person, a clean person, someone who's achieving things, someone who's moving towards their goals,
Yeah.
someone who knows what their goals are. Like, you have direction, you feel better about yourself. And I feel like that may have been when he came over, because he saw the changes in me, these changes. But when he came over and the house was clean, I think he was just like,
What?
because
Yeah.
they're always watching. They're always watching. And that was like, this can't be faked. Like,
I think for me,
that
the way
really
I
can't
would
be faked.
the way I would see it is just summarize what the beautiful things that Elisa is saying here, right? It's like we talk about this notion of you can play whatever the fuck character you want.
Right.
Right? You are free
Right.
to play whatever character you want. And the problem
Right.
though is like a lot of people, they try so hard to define who they are today, right? So for example, like when you shop for clothes, you're always looking at like what clothes are me, what clothes are not me. You look for a job, you're like, what job is me, what job is not me? What friends are me, what friends are not me? But they're not asking the question, what friends should I get
Right.
that fits my who I want to become? What job should I get that fits who I want to become? Right? What is the character I want to play here? Who am I becoming? Not who am I? Right? So once you try to change that and you define that identity and you are like doing a bunch of like things like antithetic thinking, expanding your band of operation to really shift your identity like that, that's when freedom and true power comes into you, because now you're like, I can become whoever the fuck I want. I can play whatever
Right.
character I need to be successful, whatever I need to be. And you can change your character to for work, for at home, for yourself, right? You can change your character on a macro scale as you become a parent, for example, as you get married, as you're single, as you're whatever it is, you can change your character. It's just the ultimate freedom. Like you are the most
fluid person ever.
fluid. Yeah.
A
And you feel at
chameleon.
home everywhere,
Really.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You're like that little chameleon on the branch. Like now I'm brown and blendy, you know, like now I look like a rock, right? Like
Yeah.
you can literally and in that way, like we talk about being like water, you will survive anything.
Not just
anything.
survive, thrive anywhere.
Thrive.
Anywhere. And the beautiful thing that she's saying too is like only when you can get to this deep identity shift, like fluid character like this, can you actually change your character in a productive way and be consistent at that. Because it's not just what your partner is seeing, but it's what your partner is not seeing. And my partner calls this the icks for me, right? We were struggling with sexual passion for a long time in our relationship. And we eventually got to this realization that, Jeff, you do a lot of things that are very attractive, that are very nice, that are very good, that makes me feel attracted to you, that makes me feel like I want you. But you have these 1 or 2 icks that just kills the 99 things. This one thing kills the 99 things.
Yes.
When I picture this ick that you do, I'm so turned off.
So turned off.
Like, right? And I realized like, that's how consistent I need to be, right? I cannot just like do 99 things well, but then let this one standard slip because that's an ick. And that one thing is enough to destroy everything else. So making this part of your lifestyle, part of your identity is the only way to make sure that you are 100%. Because you're not trying to fake anything. You're not trying to manufacture, contrive your actions. You're just doing you. You're just doing your new you. You're not trying to fake anything. It's not work to you. You accidentally do the right things. And that's the only time when everything, right? You really build trust. So hope that makes sense for people. I know that was a long interview, Elisa. We went way over the plan.
Did we? How long was it?
That's almost 2 hours.
What? It was great. I had a great time.
I had a good time too. I do have to run to another call, and I think they're waiting for me right now. But
awesome.
And I know you have to check out too. So thank you so much for doing this. This is so fun.
Thank you. It was.
Yeah.
I had fun.
So guys, if you want to learn more about this program that Elisa is talking about, that she's gotten herself obsessed about, we do have a masterclass. It's an 1.5 hours long, that tells you the general picture of what it is. But of course, Elisa, the program is deep, it's long,
deep.
There's no way it's over 100 hours of material. It requires a lot of work. But if you want to understand the big picture idea of it, you can join the masterclass. At the end of the masterclass, if you want to submit your application for the program, you can do so. And I think, Elisa, you know this yourself because I saw in your history that we actually said no to you at first.
Yes.
So guys, we are very selective with the people who we select. So make sure when you're filling out the application process, you are treating it seriously. Right now, we can only accept less than 10% of people who can apply. We just don't have room because we want to maintain that high level of coaching. So that's it, guys. Elisa, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. I love it.
All right. Take care, Jeff. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Elisa, what do you think?
Oh, it was great.
Elisa, do you think your partner would ever be open to doing a joint interview?
I don't know if he would. He's a very private.
I can see
private person. He's a very private person, and I don't know that he would. But maybe in the future, especially now that he's really busy, he's in school right now because the semester has started again. He might, be willing to do it in the future.
Yeah. I would appreciate it if you could broach the conversation, but no pressure either way.
Yeah.
This has been amazing in itself.
Awesome.
Elisa,
thank you so much, Jeff.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too. Take care. Bye.
Bye.